Hi, I'm Julia, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the English Talk community. If you've been learning English for a while and still feel like people speak way too fast, this episode is for you. Maybe you've been watching TV shows, listening to music, following podcasts, even studying grammar and vocabulary, but something is still missing. When people speak, especially in real-life situations, it feels like a blur. You catch a few words, maybe recognize the topic, but you don't feel confident. You nod, you smile, but deep inside, you're not really understanding. I hear this from learners all over the world. And you know what? It's not your fault. Today we're going to talk about why listening is the real superpower in English learning and how you can start getting better, starting today. I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt frustrated because you could understand written English but not spoken English? Maybe you read well, and when subtitles are on, you're okay. But the moment the subtitles are gone, you feel completely lost. You're not the only one. This is something I hear all the time from students in Paris, in Seoul, in Nairobi, in Toronto. It's a universal struggle. Because learning to listen in a new language is not just about the words. It's about rhythm. It's about sound. It's about letting your brain recognize patterns without translating. And the good news is, this is something you can train. Let me tell you about something that changed the game for one of my students, Tomasz, who lives in Warsaw. When he first came to me, he said, "I understand English when I read. I even understand my teacher. But when I watch a movie or hear native speakers talk, I get nothing." He wasn't exaggerating. I asked him what he was doing to improve his listening. He said he watched a lot of English shows on Netflix, always with subtitles. But the moment he turned them off, panic. So I asked him to do something different. I told him to choose just one episode, only one. I said, don't binge watch 10 episodes. Just focus on one. Watch it 5 times. First with subtitles. Then without. Then just the audio. Then again with subtitles. Then once more without. He thought it was strange, but he tried it. And something amazing happened. By the 4th watch, he started hearing sentences he hadn't noticed before. His brain was picking up chunks, phrases, patterns. By the end of the week, he wasn't translating anymore, he was understanding. So if you're here listening today, maybe you feel the same way Tomasz did. Maybe you've been stuck at that stage where you want to understand but just can't keep up. I want to help you break through that wall. And the first step is this: stop expecting to understand everything the first time. Let go of that pressure. Real listening fluency doesn't come from understanding once, it comes from hearing the same thing again and again until your brain gets comfortable. That's how babies learn. That's how you learned your first language. And that's how your English will improve too. Now, I also want to ask you a favor. If anything I'm saying makes sense to you, or if you feel like this episode might help someone you know, hit the like button or subscribe to this podcast. We're building a global community of learners, people from every continent, helping each other grow. When you engage with the podcast, it tells the platform that this is worth sharing. And more people find us. More people like you. People who are working hard to learn, who feel frustrated sometimes, but who haven't given up. People who don't need perfection, they just need progress. Let me be honest with you. I know English can feel hard. Especially when you've been studying for years and still don't feel fluent. But I want you to hear me clearly, you're not behind. You're not broken. Your brain just needs more of the right kind of practice. And in this episode, I'll guide you through how to do that. Step by step. No complicated grammar, no boring drills, just real tools that work in real life. You see, we often think we need to study more vocabulary, more grammar rules, more exercises. But the truth is, sometimes we need to listen more, with attention and repetition. Listening is how you train your brain to hear the music of English. Every language has its own rhythm, its own melody. And when you start to recognize that rhythm, everything changes. Words that once sounded too fast now feel familiar. Sentences that used to confuse you now make sense. You stop translating and start understanding. Think about a song you love. Maybe you didn't catch all the lyrics the first time. But after hearing it 5 or 10 times, you can sing along. Why? Because your brain learned the sound before the meaning. That's what we're going to do with English. We're going to train your ears, not just your eyes. You're not learning English to pass a test. You're learning to understand people, to connect, to express yourself. And listening is the door to all of that, and here's one more thing. Listening doesn't have to be boring. You can listen to comedy, to cooking shows, to interviews, to podcasts like this one. The key is to choose something you enjoy and repeat it. Don't be afraid to listen again and again. Repetition isn't failure. Repetition is training. It's how your brain becomes familiar with the sounds of English. Some people think they're bad at languages because they can't understand fast English. But it's not about talent. It's about exposure. It's about how often and how deeply you let your brain engage with English. So don't give up just because it feels hard. Hard means your brain is working. Hard means you're growing, and while we're here together, I want you to think about one thing. What if improving your English listening wasn't about studying harder, but listening smarter? What if the key wasn't more time, but better habits? I believe that's true. And I believe that if you apply even one of the ideas I'll share with you today, you'll start noticing a difference this week. So take a breath. You're in the right place. You're not alone. And you don't have to figure it all out at once. We're going to go step by step, with stories from real people just like you. Learners from different countries, different backgrounds, all with the same goal: to understand English better. To feel confident. To stop surviving conversations and start enjoying them. You're here because you care. You want to grow. And I'm here to help you do that. Let's take the pressure off. Let's learn to listen in a way that feels natural, consistent, and, most of all, possible. Because it is possible. And you're closer than you think. Luis was born and raised in Madrid, and although he had studied English for many years, he never felt confident using it in fast-paced conversations. When he moved to Berlin for a new job in tech, he knew that the company culture would require daily communication in English. At first, he wasn't too worried. After all, he had passed his English exams, he could write emails, and he had even watched dozens of TV shows in English, always with subtitles. But during his first week in the office, he realized something wasn't right. In meetings, people spoke quickly, using phrases he had never learned in class. He couldn't keep up. It felt like the words were running together into one long sound. Even when he recognized individual words, the overall meaning escaped him. I still remember when Luis sent me a message saying, "Julia, I think there's something wrong with me. Everyone says English gets easier when you practice, but the more I listen, the less I understand." I told him this was more common than he thought. In fact, one of the main reasons people struggle with listening in real conversations is because they try to translate everything in real time. That's exactly what Luis was doing. His brain was trying to listen in English, stop, turn it into Spanish, make sense of it, and then respond. And by the time he finished translating the first sentence, his coworkers were already 3 steps ahead. So we started working on changing that. I told him something simple that shifted his mindset. I said, Luis, the goal isn't to translate English into Spanish. The goal is to understand English as English. That sounds obvious, but for most learners, it takes time to accept. I asked him what kind of English he was listening to outside of work. He told me he usually listened to American podcasts with very clear, slow speech. At work, though, his coworkers came from many countries. Some were German, some Dutch, some Indian, others from the UK. Each had their own rhythm, their own accent, and none of them spoke like the slow, clear podcast hosts he had practiced with. This is where we made a small but powerful change. I asked him to choose a different kind of listening material. Instead of polished podcasts, I told him to start watching videos of real workplace meetings on YouTube, panel discussions, interviews, and spontaneous conversations with non-native speakers. I wanted him to hear English in action, in a natural and sometimes messy way. At first, it was uncomfortable. He couldn't understand much. But I told him not to stop. I gave him one strategy: listen to one short clip 3 times each day. First time, just listen. Second time, write down what you understand. Third time, check with subtitles or transcript. Then, repeat the same clip for 3 days before switching. Luis followed the plan. The first week was frustrating. He felt like he wasn't improving. But I reminded him, your brain is adjusting. Let it struggle. It's part of the process. By the second week, something shifted. He told me he could start hearing individual phrases in meetings, things like "let's circle back," "we're on the same page," and "can you give me a quick update?" Before, those sounded like a blur. Now, he could recognize them, almost like a song lyric that suddenly becomes cleared. We also worked on stopping the habit of translating. One way we did that was by practicing with chunks of language. I gave him short expressions to repeat aloud, like "I see what you mean" or "let me double check that." He said them out loud, not once, but 5 or 6 times in a row, every morning before work. This made them stick in his mind as full pieces, not separate words. That way, when he heard them in meetings, he didn't have to analyze or translate, he just understood. Another thing that helped Luis was learning to predict meaning from context. He didn't need to understand every word. We practiced watching videos with the sound on, then off, then on again, training his brain to pick up meaning from tone, body language, and key vocabulary. This gave him confidence. He realized that even native speakers don't catch every single word. The key is getting the main idea and responding naturally. He also made one more change in his daily routine. Instead of only listening passively on his commute, he began using that time more actively. He chose short clips and would pause every 30 seconds to repeat what he heard. He spoke out loud, mimicking the speaker's tone and rhythm. It felt strange at first, especially sitting on the train with people around. But he said after 1 week, his ears became sharper. He could pick up speed, tone, and emotional cues better. It wasn't just about understanding the words anymore, it was about understanding the message. I remember one day he called me and said, "Julia, today I was in a meeting with 4 people speaking fast, and I actually understood everything. I didn't translate. I didn't panic. I followed the conversation and even answered with confidence." That was a turning point for him. Not because he suddenly became fluent overnight, but because he finally trusted his ability to process English in real time. He had trained his ears and stopped expecting perfection. That made all the difference. Luis's story is not unique. Many learners believe that fast English means they aren't good enough. But the truth is, fast English is just natural English. And the more you expose yourself to it, the more your brain adapts. It takes time, yes. But it's possible. The mistake is expecting to understand fast speech the same way you understand written text. They are different skills. Listening in real conversations is like learning to swim in a real river, not just reading about swimming in a book. Luis didn't improve by studying harder. He improved by listening differently. By giving his brain real input, repeating short clips, practicing with real speech, and letting go of the pressure to understand everything. He made listening part of his life, not a separate task, but something integrated into his daily world. And once he stopped translating and started reacting, everything changed. His confidence went up, his stress went down, and English finally started to feel like a real language, not just a subject in school. So if English feels too fast for you right now, maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe the problem is the method. And if Luis could change that and start understanding, so can you. It starts with small steps, small changes, and a little patience with your amazing brain. When I talk to English learners around the world, there's one thing I hear over and over. They say, I understand some words, but I don't understand the full sentence. Or, I catch the beginning, but then I get lost. And I always tell them the same thing. Listening in English isn't just about catching words. That's what most people believe at first, but it's not enough. The real breakthrough comes when you start training your brain to hear patterns. That one shift changes everything. If you keep listening for words, you'll always feel like you're chasing the speaker, trying to keep up. But if you train yourself to hear patterns, those familiar groupings of words that show up again and again, you'll start to understand faster, more naturally, and with much less stress. Think about how you listen in your native language. You're not thinking about each word. You're recognizing familiar combinations. You're feeling the rhythm. You don't need to process every single sound. Your brain just gets it. That's the level we want to reach in English. And to get there, the first thing you need to do is shift your focus from single words to repeated phrases. From isolated vocabulary to whole expressions. From understanding one word to feeling the pattern in a sentence. This is how you stop translating and start understanding. Let me give you an example. One of the most common expressions in English is "you know what I mean?" You've probably heard it many times. But if you only focus on the individual words, "you know what I mean," you'll struggle when it shows up in a real conversation, spoken quickly and connected. It might sound like "you know what I mean," and if you've never trained your ear to hear it as one pattern, it will sound too fast, even though you technically know all the words. That's the problem. Your brain doesn't have that pattern stored yet. But once you've heard it 5, 10, 15 times in natural context, it becomes automatic. You stop hearing 5 separate words. You hear one idea. One sound block. And you understand it instantly. That's why short, repeated listening is more powerful than hours of difficult content. If you listen to something once and don't understand it, your brain has no chance to process it. It feels overwhelming. But if you listen to a short clip 3 or 4 times, your brain starts to catch the patterns. The first time, it hears noise. The second time, it notices familiar sounds. The third time, it begins to connect meaning. The fourth time, it feels easier. It doesn't mean you understand every word. It means your brain is adapting. That's the shift that leads to real fluency. I worked with a student named Sophie, from Lyon, who had this exact problem. She told me, "I listen to English every day, but I still don't feel like I'm improving. I asked her what kind of content she was using. She said she listened to interviews and long-form podcasts. But when I asked if she listened to the same episode more than once, she said no. Every day, it was something new. That sounds productive, but here's the problem: her brain never had a chance to build familiarity. She was feeding it too much new information without repetition. So I asked her to stop listening to new things every day. I gave her one 5-minute video. That's all. And I asked her to listen to it for 5 days straight. She felt it was a waste of time. She said, "But I already listened to it." I told her, that's the point. After 3 days, she messaged me, "It's working. I'm hearing new things I missed the first time." On day 5, she said the expressions felt natural. She could repeat parts without looking. That 5-minute video gave her more progress than the 10 different episodes she had listened to the week before. Not because it was special, but because she gave her brain time to absorb the patterns. That's what real listening practice looks like. When you focus on repetition, something magical happens. You stop fighting with the language. You stop feeling overwhelmed. Your brain starts to relax, because it knows what's coming. That's when you learn. It's the same reason children love hearing the same story every night. They're not bored. They're training their minds to recognize language, rhythm, and meaning. And guess what? Adults learn the same way. We just forget that because school taught us that repetition is boring. But repetition is where fluency is born. Let's talk about how to make this part of your routine. Start with something short, no more than 2 or 3 minutes. It could be a scene from a movie, a clip from a YouTube video, or even a part of this podcast. Listen to it once just to get the feel. Then play it again and try to catch more details. On the third listen, try to repeat 1 or 2 expressions out loud. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Just speak. Let the words come out naturally, even if they're not clear. Your brain is learning through sound, not through analysis. If you want to go deeper, write down a few of the phrases you hear. Not individual words, phrases. Things like "I didn't catch that," or "What do you think about it," or "Let's give it a try." These are the patterns native speakers use all the time. And if you train your ear to recognize them, you'll start to hear them everywhere. That's when you stop saying, "English is too fast," and start saying, "Wait, I know that phrase." That moment of recognition builds confidence. It gives you the courage to keep going. I know some people think they need to build a huge vocabulary before they can understand real conversations. But I don't believe that. I think you can understand a lot with just a small number of words, if those words are used in patterns your brain recognizes. Instead of memorizing new vocabulary every day, try repeating familiar expressions until they become part of you. That way, when you hear someone speak, your brain doesn't panic. It just reacts. That's how you build fluency from the inside out. The shift I'm asking you to make is simple, but powerful. Stop thinking of listening as a test where you have to understand every single word. Start thinking of it as training. Train your brain to recognize patterns. Trust that understanding will come with repetition. Choose one short video or audio clip. Listen to it again and again. Focus on expressions, not words. Speak them out loud. Let them become part of your natural rhythm. It doesn't have to take hours. 10 minutes a day is enough if you use that time with intention. You're not trying to finish a course. You're trying to change how your brain hears English. And every time you hear a pattern that feels familiar, you're making progress. So give yourself permission to repeat. Give your brain time. And most of all, trust the process. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't need a bigger vocabulary. You need practice with real English, repeated often enough that your brain starts to recognize the music of the language. And once it does, everything becomes easier. Aisha lived in Istanbul, and every morning she took the same train to work. It was a 40-minute ride, and like most people, she used that time to scroll through her phone or listen to music. But after a team meeting where she couldn't follow half of what was said, she realized something needed to change. Her company had started using English more often in client calls and internal communication, and even though she had studied English in school and could read emails just fine, she froze when it came to fast, real conversations. The words blended together, and by the time she caught one phrase, the speaker had already moved on. She told me later, I kept thinking I wasn't good enough, that maybe I wasn't made for English. But the truth was, she just hadn't trained her ears. I met Aisha through a colleague who recommended the podcast, and she reached out to ask how she could improve her listening without adding extra hours to her already full day. The first thing I asked her was, when do you usually listen to English? She paused. Honestly, I don't. I read, I write emails, but I usually avoid listening unless I really have to. That was the problem. Listening, like any other skill, needs consistent exposure. Not just random noise in the background, but focused listening. And not just once, but repeatedly, with intention. So I gave her a challenge. I said, use your train ride. Choose one podcast episode in English, something short, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and listen to the same one every morning for a week. Don't switch to a new episode each day. Stick with one. Listen to it at least 3 times during your commute. First, just listen. Second, try to focus on the phrases. Third, try to repeat parts out loud or in your head. She looked surprised. The same episode? Won't that be boring? I told her, only the first day. After that, it will feel like your brain is slowly unlocking the meaning. She picked an episode that was a little challenging but still clear enough to follow. On the first day, she messaged me and said, I understood maybe 30%. She could catch words here and there, but the structure felt chaotic. She didn't give up. On the second day, she listened again. She said some parts started to feel familiar. She remembered where certain expressions appeared and could anticipate them. By the third day, she recognized full sentences. And by the 5th day, something interesting happened. She started speaking the phrases in her head before the speaker finished saying them. This wasn't because she suddenly learned new grammar. It was because her brain was adapting. She had given it time to absorb the patterns, the rhythm, the tone, the connection between sounds. I remember her excitement when she told me, it feels like I'm inside the conversation now, not just watching it from the outside. That's the shift I want every listener to feel. Not just hearing English, but being part of it. What Aisha discovered was the power of predictable input. By listening to the same content over and over, she reduced the number of new variables. She wasn't trying to decode 100 different topics. She was focusing on one and going deeper. And that gave her a level of confidence she had never felt before. She said something to me that stuck in my mind. She said, I used to think I needed to listen to more English. But now I know I need to listen to the same English, just more often. The next week, she had another meeting at work. This time, she didn't freeze. She followed what her colleagues said. Not every word, but enough to respond naturally. And because she had been practicing repeating phrases in her head, she had ready-made expressions she could use. Things like that make sense, or I see your point, or let's move forward with that. These weren't memorized lines, they were phrases her brain had become comfortable with through repetition. Later, she told me she started to feel proud of her progress. She said the train, which used to feel like wasted time, had become her secret classroom. A place where she could focus, repeat, and grow. No one around her knew she was practicing English, but every day, she was getting better. And the best part? It didn't take extra time from her schedule. She didn't have to stay up late studying. She didn't need expensive classes. She used what she already had, a daily routine, and added focused, repeated listening to it. What I love about Aisha's story is how small the change was. She didn't do anything dramatic. She didn't move to another country. She didn't change jobs. She didn't spend hours every day with her nose in a textbook. She just listened with purpose. She picked one piece of English and listened to it until it felt like a part of her. That's how listening fluency is built, not in massive leaps, but in tiny repetitions that train your brain to hear and understand naturally, she also told me. She started noticing English everywhere, on signs, in songs, in conversations around her city. Once her ears were trained, she felt more connected to the language, even outside of structured practice. That's the result of training your brain to recognize patterns. You become more alert, more responsive, and more confident. It's not about understanding every word. It's about staying calm, listening actively, and trusting that your brain knows more than you think. The strategy she used is something anyone can apply. Choose a short audio. Listen to it every day for 5 to 7 days. The first time, you might feel lost. That's normal. But stay with it. Listen again and again. Focus on the parts you understand. Then try to catch the parts you missed. And slowly, piece by piece, the meaning will start to come together. Speak the phrases out loud. Repeat them until they feel easy. This isn't passive listening. It's active training. And it works. Aisha's train ride didn't just take her to work, it became a journey into real English. And every repetition was a step closer to confidence. You can do the same, whether you're commuting, walking, cooking, or even waiting in line. The time you already have can become your greatest tool. And the content you listen to doesn't have to be new every day. In fact, it shouldn't be. Find something you like. Stay with it. Repeat it. Let it become familiar. Because familiarity builds fluency. Aisha didn't need to change her life. She just needed to change how she listened. And in doing that, she unlocked the confidence to speak in real conversations, not perfectly, but with presence and ease. And that's what true fluency is about. When people tell me they've been listening to English for months but still struggle to understand native speakers, I usually ask them what they're listening to. And very often, the answer is, I use slow English audio or I listen to beginner podcasts where they speak very clearly and slowly. Now, don't get me wrong. Slow English is a great tool. It helps you get comfortable with sounds, it builds confidence at the beginning, and it allows you to focus on pronunciation. But there's a point where it stops helping and starts holding you back. If you only listen to slow English, you may end up stuck. It becomes a trap. You feel like you're doing something useful, but your brain isn't being challenged enough to grow. That's why I always say, slow is good, but natural is better. Your goal is not to understand slow English forever. Your goal is to understand real English, how people actually speak in the real world. And real English is messy. It's fast. It's full of pauses, cuts, filler words, changes in rhythm, and different accents. People talk over each other. They use expressions you won't find in textbooks. If you only train with slow, perfect speech, your brain never gets a chance to deal with that real-life complexity. So when you finally hear someone speaking naturally, it's like your training didn't prepare you for the real thing. That's the moment many learners panic. They think they're not ready. But they are. They just haven't given their brain the input it needs to handle real-world English. I worked with a student named Jonas from Stockholm. He had an advanced vocabulary. He could write very well. But when he traveled to Dublin for a short-term work project, he told me he couldn't understand his co-workers at lunch. It wasn't because of the grammar. It was the way they spoke, fast, with contractions, idioms, and a rhythm he wasn't used to. He said, "I feel like I'm listening underwater. I catch a few words, but I miss the meaning." When I asked him what he usually listened to, he said he followed a podcast for learners that used slow speech. Everything was clear, structured, and explained. And that was the problem. His ears were trained for clean, careful English, but not for the kind that people actually use. We decided to shift his routine. I gave him a few clips of real conversations, unscripted, spontaneous, and full of natural pauses and overlaps. He felt overwhelmed at first. He said, "I don't understand half of it." But I encouraged him to stay with it. "Don't try to catch every word," I told him. "Just listen. Focus on the rhythm, the tone, and the general idea." Over time, he started recognizing patterns. He noticed the rising tone at the end of a question, the way native speakers pause before making a point, the way they link words together. And slowly, things started to make more sense, not because he learned new vocabulary, but because his brain was finally learning to deal with natural English. This kind of exposure is essential if you want to feel confident in real conversations. You don't have to understand every word to benefit from listening. In fact, your brain learns more when it struggles a little. That's called productive difficulty. It means you're pushing yourself just enough that your brain has to work, but not so much that you feel lost. When you listen to something slightly above your level, your mind starts reaching for meaning. You begin to notice how people say things, not just what they say. You notice intonation, pauses, repetition. That's what helps you understand English beyond just words. That's how you become a real listener. Natural speech also teaches you how to handle uncertainty. In slow English, everything is predictable. But in the real world, people change direction mid-sentence. They say, "Well, I mean, kind of, you know what I'm saying?" That's not wrong, it's just how people talk. If you never hear this type of language, it surprises you when it happens. But if you're used to it, it doesn't scare you anymore. You accept it, process it, and move on. That's the flexibility that fluent listeners have. And it only comes from practice with natural English. I remember one woman, Miriam, from Casablanca, who told me she avoided natural English because it made her feel stupid. She said she liked slow speech because it made her feel safe. But that safety came at a cost. She was stuck in a bubble. I told her, "You're not stupid. You're just not used to the sound of fast, natural English. And your brain can learn it if you give it the chance." We started by choosing short clips from interviews, reality shows, and real conversations. She listened to one clip per day for a week. At first, she felt lost. But by the third day, she could catch more. By the fifth day, she started recognizing the emotional tone behind the words. Her ears were adjusting. That's the key. Another important part of natural speech is emotional context. In slow speech, everything sounds flat. But in natural conversations, you hear surprise, sarcasm, excitement, doubt. You hear people expressing real feelings through their voices. And that helps you understand more, even when you don't get every word. Your brain uses tone and emotion as clues. You start to feel what's being said, not just translate it. That kind of understanding is powerful, and it only comes from listening to how people really talk. Now, I know it can feel scary to move from slow, safe English to the faster, unpredictable kind. That's why I always recommend starting with short clips. Don't jump into a full 45-minute podcast where everyone is speaking quickly and nonstop. Choose something small, maybe 1 or 2 minutes of natural conversation. Listen to it multiple times. First, just for the feeling. Then for the key phrases. Then try to speak some of it out loud. You don't have to be perfect. Just get used to the rhythm. Over time, your ears will change. Your brain will start recognizing the music of English. And that's when the magic happens. You'll start understanding more without even realizing how. You'll stop needing subtitles all the time. You'll hear something and think, I know that phrase, even if you don't remember where you learned it. That's fluency in listening, not perfect understanding, but comfortable reaction. The ability to stay calm, keep listening, and stay in the conversation even when things move fast. So yes, slow English can help you build a foundation. But don't stay there forever. Step into the real sound of the language. Let your ears get used to the way people actually speak. And let your brain do what it was built to do: adapt, learn, and grow. Fluency doesn't come from perfect input. It comes from repeated exposure to real language, in real situations, with all its speed, emotion, and rhythm. And the sooner you allow yourself to listen to English as it truly is, the sooner you'll feel at home in it. One of the most effective ways to improve your listening skills and your pronunciation at the same time is a method called shadowing. It's simple, powerful, and completely free. I've used this technique with hundreds of learners around the world, and it works every single time if you stay consistent. Shadowing means you listen to someone speak in English and immediately repeat what they say, trying to match their speed, rhythm, and tone as closely as possible. You don't wait, you don't pause, you speak while listening, just a second behind the speaker, like their shadow. That's where the name comes from. And yes, it feels a little strange at first. Your brain is working hard. Your mouth is moving before you even fully understand what's being said. But that's the point. Shadowing trains your ears, your brain, and your mouth to work together, and that's exactly what you need if you want to understand fast, natural English. I always tell people, you don't need perfect grammar. You need rhythm. You need confidence. You need fluency in the way your brain processes and your mouth responds. Shadowing helps you build that muscle. You might not notice it after the first day, but after just 1 week, you'll feel it. Your pronunciation improves. Your listening gets faster. Your ability to react without translating increases. It's one of the best tools you can use, especially if you don't live in an English-speaking country and don't get daily conversation practice. Let me tell you how to start. First, choose a short clip. 30 seconds is enough. It could be from a podcast, a TV show, or even this one. The important thing is that it's natural, clear, and not too fast. Then, listen to it once without speaking. Just listen. Get a feel for the tone, the rhythm, and the message. The second time, try shadowing. Don't worry if you miss parts. Just jump back in when you can. Try to copy the voice as closely as possible, not just the words, but the way the words flow. This is key. Shadowing is not about repeating one word at a time. It's about capturing the sound of English. The way native speakers link words, the way their voice rises and falls, the way they pause. That's what makes you sound fluent, not perfect grammar. A few years ago, I worked with a young woman named Hannah from Jakarta. She had great grammar, a strong vocabulary, and had studied English for years. But she told me, when I speak, I sound robotic. I know I'm saying the right words, but something is missing. I knew right away she needed shadowing. We chose a short scene from a cooking show, something casual and friendly. We split the scene into small parts. I asked her to listen, repeat immediately, and focus on matching the tone. It was hard at first. She stumbled. She got frustrated. But she kept going. After a few days, I heard a difference. Her voice became more natural. Her pacing improved. Her stress on words began to match what native speakers use. She started doing it every morning, just 5 minutes. She picked one clip and shadowed it 3 times in a row. Sometimes she did it while making coffee or getting ready for work. After 1 week, she sent me a recording of her reading a paragraph out loud. The change was clear. She sounded more relaxed. Her intonation was smoother. And she told me, now when I listen to people speak, I hear more than just words. I hear how they speak, and I feel like I can join in. That's the beauty of shadowing. It sharpens your ears. It helps you pick up the music of English, the pauses, the flow, the emphasis. Most learners don't train this part. They focus on reading and writing, but not speaking and listening together. Shadowing fills that gap. You don't need a teacher for it. You don't need a classroom. You just need a voice to follow and the courage to try. One common question I get is, should I understand everything before I shadow? My answer is no. Understanding will come with repetition. Your first goal is sound. Let your ears guide your mouth. Your brain will catch up. Of course, if you're completely lost, you can check the transcript or subtitles, but don't let that be your starting point. Start with listening. That's what real conversation is. In a conversation, you don't get subtitles. You get sound. Shadowing prepares you for that reality. Another tip, record yourself. I know, nobody likes hearing their own voice. But it's a great way to measure progress. Do your shadowing exercise on day 1, and then again on day 7. Record both. You'll be surprised at the difference. You'll hear the growth in your rhythm and confidence. And that's incredibly motivating. You can also shadow with different accents. One day, pick a clip with an American speaker. The next, choose a British voice. Or someone from Canada, Ireland, South Africa, or India. This builds your flexibility and helps you understand real-world English, not just classroom English. Because in the real world, you'll hear all kinds of voices. Shadowing prepares you to handle them. Let me walk you through a simple shadowing routine you can start today. Choose a 30-second audio clip. Listen once, no speaking. Then listen again and shadow it. Don't stop if you make a mistake, just keep going. Do it 3 times. Then, if you want, speak the same part without listening. Try to say it from memory. You don't have to be exact, just get the flow. After a week of doing this with one clip, move on to another. And remember, shorter is better in the beginning. Focus on mastery, not speed. Some days it will feel hard. Some days your brain will get tired. That's normal. It means your brain is building new connections. When you shadow, you're doing several things at once: listening, speaking, thinking, adjusting your voice. It's like mental weight training. You won't always see results right away, but they're happening. Your brain is becoming faster, your ear more sensitive, and your speech more automatic. One of my favorite things about shadowing is how portable it is. You can do it while walking, while waiting, even while cooking. You don't need to sit down with a textbook. You just need a pair of headphones and a little time. That's the beauty of this method, it fits into your life, not the other way around. If you've been feeling stuck with your listening or your speaking, give shadowing a try. It might feel strange for a few days, but keep going. Your mouth will learn to move like a native speaker's. Your ears will start to hear the hidden sounds between words. You'll start to recognize expressions more quickly. And little by little, you'll notice something amazing. You're not just repeating English anymore. You're starting to live it. And that's when fluency becomes real. Naomi lives in Tokyo, and when she first came to me, she wasn't looking for another lesson or textbook. She just wanted to feel more comfortable with English. She had studied it in school like most people, passed her exams, and could read and write with no problem. But when it came to understanding fast, spoken English, she felt lost. She said it always seemed like people were speaking too quickly, and she couldn't catch anything unless she had subtitles. Every time she watched a video, she had to pause, rewind, or rely on the text to follow along. It made her feel discouraged, like she would never be able to enjoy English naturally. So I asked her what she liked to do in her free time, not related to studying, not related to work. She smiled and said, "I love cooking." That's when something clicked. I told her, "Don't study English. Just do what you love, in English." I suggested she start watching recipe videos, not for learning, but for fun. I said, find a YouTube channel with recipes you actually want to try. Watch the chef, follow along, don't worry about understanding everything. Just let the language be there while you do something you already enjoy. She liked the idea immediately because it didn't feel like homework. It felt personal. She was already cooking every evening, so this wasn't about adding something new to her schedule, it was about changing the language of a routine she already loved. The first few days were a bit strange for her. She chose a cooking channel where the chef spoke with a warm British accent, and at first, Naomi felt overwhelmed by the speed and rhythm. She couldn't understand much. But she kept the subtitles off, just letting the audio play in the background while she cooked. She didn't pause or rewind. She just listened, chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and tried to follow the video with her eyes and ears together. After a week, she noticed something interesting. She started recognizing small phrases, a pinch of salt, bring it to a boil, give it a stir. These little expressions began to repeat across different videos, and her brain began to catch them faster. That's the power of connecting language to something you care about. Because she wasn't trying to study, her brain stayed relaxed. There was no pressure to understand everything. She wasn't taking notes. She wasn't testing herself. She was just living in English for a little part of her day. And when your brain is relaxed and engaged with something enjoyable, it's actually more open to learning. It starts to notice patterns without even trying. That's exactly what happened to Naomi. By the end of the first month, she was understanding entire steps without needing to pause. She told me, "Julia, I didn't even realize it, but I stopped thinking in Japanese while watching. I just followed along." That's an important moment for any learner, when you stop translating and start reacting. It doesn't mean you understand every single word, but it means your brain has started to think in English in a very natural, intuitive way. What Naomi did is what I call immersion through joy. She built listening practice into her daily Life using something she already loved. It didn't feel like extra work. It didn't feel like pressure. It felt like fun. And because of that, she stuck with it. That consistency, watching every evening while cooking, gave her a kind of exposure that no classroom could offer. It was real, personal, and tied to movement, sound, and rhythm. That kind of learning goes deep. She also began speaking to herself in English during the cooking process. At first, it was simple, now I add the garlic, or let's turn down the heat. But over time, her phrases became more natural, I think that's too much salt, or let me check if this is ready. She wasn't doing it to impress anyone. She was just practicing out loud, repeating the kinds of sentences she heard in the videos. And because those phrases were repeated in context, she remembered them easily. They stuck. She didn't have to memorize them, they became part of her everyday language. A few weeks later, she surprised herself. She was hosting a small dinner for 2 colleagues from her company's international team. The conversation naturally switched to English, and for the first time, she didn't panic. She spoke calmly, clearly, and without searching too hard for words. She even joked about the recipe they were eating and explained the steps in English. She told me afterward, it felt like I had trained for that moment without knowing it. What Naomi experienced is something I want all of you to try. Find one thing you love, maybe it's cooking, maybe it's fashion, gaming, photography, or travel. Then, find English content that speaks your language of interest. Don't worry if it feels hard at first. Don't aim to understand every word. Just show up every day. Let the language be part of something you already enjoy. Over time, your brain will do the rest. It will start connecting sounds to meaning. It will begin predicting phrases. And it will reward you with those small moments of surprise, like when you suddenly understand a full sentence without even realizing it. Naomi never sat down with a grammar book during this process. She didn't memorize vocabulary lists. She didn't use subtitles. What she did was simple and effective. She changed the language of an activity she loved. That shift, choosing to live in English even for just a part of her evening, transformed her confidence. Her listening skills improved not because she studied harder, but because she listened with curiosity, over and over again, in a real and enjoyable context. She still sends me links to her favorite recipe videos, and every time I watch them, I smile, because I know what they represent for her. They're not just meals. They're proof that language learning can be natural. It can be joyful. It can fit into your life exactly as it is. And when you listen through love, your progress doesn't feel like progress, it just feels like part of who you are. That's how real fluency begins, not with stress, but with connection. I know how tempting subtitles can be. They make you feel safe. When someone's speaking fast or using expressions you don't know, subtitles are like a security blanket. You can still follow what's going on. And honestly, in the beginning, they can be really helpful. They connect sound to meaning. They show you the words your brain hasn't quite caught up with yet. But here's the thing, subtitles are a tool, not a solution. If you rely on them every time you listen to English, you're not really training your ears. You're training your eyes. And that's a completely different skill. Reading is not the same as listening. If you want to understand English when someone's talking directly to you, without text, without help, you have to break the habit of watching instead of listening. A lot of learners ask me, should I use subtitles? And my answer is always the same, yes, but only strategically. Use them to support your progress, not to protect yourself from the challenge. If you always turn on subtitles by default, your brain never learns to deal with sound. You'll read faster than you listen, and the moment someone speaks without subtitles, you'll freeze. That's not because your listening is bad. It's because your brain hasn't been trained to handle raw input. So let's talk about how to use subtitles the right way, so that they help you grow, not hold you back. There's a technique I teach my students that I call the 3-step subtitle method. It's simple, powerful, and works for any video or audio with transcripts. Step 1. Watch or listen without subtitles. Yes, without. Even if you don't understand everything. Even if it feels uncomfortable. You're training your brain to listen, not to read. This step is where the real work happens. Try to catch the main idea. Focus on intonation, rhythm, repeated phrases. Let your ears do the heavy lifting. Step 2. Watch the same clip with subtitles. This is where you check yourself. Compare what you heard with what was actually said. Were you close? Did you guess the meaning correctly? Did you miss a phrase that now makes perfect sense? This step isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. It connects the audio to the words without removing the challenge. You're reinforcing what your brain just worked hard to figure out. Step 3. Watch it again, this time without subtitles. This is the most important part. By now, your brain has already heard the sounds, seen the text, and made connections. This third round is about locking it in. You'll be amazed at how much more you catch the second time around. The sound will feel more familiar. The words will land more clearly. That's because repetition, combined with smart support, builds real listening power. I used this method with a student named Luca, from Milan. He was used to watching everything with English subtitles on TV shows, YouTube, interviews. He thought it was helping, and in some ways, it was. But every time he tried to understand spoken English without the subtitles, he couldn't. He felt like he was starting from zero. So I asked him to try the 3-step method with just one scene from his favorite show. First, watch it without subtitles. Then with subtitles. Then again without. At first, he said it felt too hard. But after a week of practicing with short clips, no more than 2 or 3 minutes, he said something changed. He wasn't catching every word, but he was catching the idea. He wasn't guessing randomly anymore. His ears were tuning in. This method works because it respects how your brain learns. At first, you struggle, that's how you stretch your skills. Then you clarify, that's how you connect the sounds to meaning. Then you reinforce, that's how it sticks. Using subtitles the smart way gives you the best of both worlds. You get the support, but you also build independence. Here's another tip. Don't use subtitles in your native language. If you're learning English and you watch a video with subtitles in French, Korean, or Turkish, you're not training your English at all. You're just translating. That's helpful when you're an absolute beginner, but if your goal is fluency, this habit will slow you down. Instead, if you need subtitles, use them in English. That way, you're still working within the language. Your brain sees the word, hears the sound, and connects the two. It's still English in, English out. One of my students, Jaiwon from Seoul, used to turn on Korean subtitles for every English video. She told me it was the only way she felt she could keep up. But after weeks of doing this, she realized something: her reading skills were improving, but her listening wasn't. So we switched to English subtitles only, and followed the 3-step method. After 2 weeks, she told me she didn't feel so lost anymore when subtitles were off. Her brain had started listening more actively. That shift in focus made all the difference. Let's also talk about when to stop using subtitles completely. If you're always watching content that's too hard without them, your brain will panic and give up. But once you've gone through the 3-step method a few times, you can begin to challenge yourself. Choose something just a little above your level and try watching it without subtitles from the start. At first, you'll feel like you're missing a lot, but keep going. After a while, you'll notice that your brain is picking up more and more. You'll get used to the sound. You'll recognize phrases even without needing to see them. That's the moment when subtitles are no longer a crutch, they've done their job, and you're standing on your own. Another helpful way to transition is to listen to audio without subtitles, but read the transcript afterward. That's especially useful for podcasts or audio-only content. It gives your ears the full experience, then lets you review what you heard. You'll see where you were right and where you missed something. But the learning is deeper because your brain tried first. That effort matters. It builds confidence and sharpens your listening over time. The main idea I want you to remember is this: subtitles are support, not a solution. They're not bad, but they're not enough. If you want to truly improve your English listening, you have to step out of the comfort zone of subtitles sometimes. Give your ears space to grow. Let your brain get used to the natural sound of English without needing text. The more you train this way, the less you'll depend on subtitles in the future. And that independence is one of the biggest signs that your listening is becoming fluent. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in your English listening practice is learning to repeat. Most people believe that to improve, they need more podcasts, more videos, more content, always something new. But the truth is, more is not always better. In fact, if you listen to something just once and then move on, you're missing the real opportunity to grow. Your brain doesn't fully learn from the first exposure. It learns through repetition. Listening once is survival. Listening again is understanding. And listening a third, fourth, or even fifth time is where mastery begins. Let me explain how this works. The first time you hear something in English, especially if it's fast or filled with unfamiliar expressions, your brain is just trying to survive. You catch a few words, maybe understand the topic, but it's exhausting. You feel like everything is moving too quickly. That's normal. Your brain is still figuring out where the important parts are. It's working hard to organize the sounds, find patterns, and make sense of what's happening. This is exactly why one listen isn't enough. It's like walking into a dark room, you need a few seconds before your eyes adjust. Your ears are the same. Now imagine you go back and listen a second time. Suddenly, some words sound more familiar. You remember that the speaker said "that's a good point" or "let me explain." Your brain starts filling in the gaps. You're not starting from zero anymore. You have a mental map now. You begin to focus more on meaning instead of just trying to hear individual words. And this is where learning really starts to happen. Because now your brain isn't panicking, it's working with something it already knows. It's reinforcing what you just heard, deepening the understanding. Then comes the third time. Now it feels different. You can predict what comes next. When the speaker begins a sentence, you almost hear the ending in your mind before they say it. That's a sign. Your brain is internalizing the structure, the flow, and the rhythm of natural English. You're not just learning words anymore, you're learning how native speakers use them. This is what makes you fluent, not translating from your first language, but reacting instinctively, like your brain is already part of the conversation. I worked with a student named Emma from Vienna who struggled with listening comprehension. She told me, "I understand English when I read, but when I listen, I feel lost. It's like everything disappears." She used to jump from one podcast to another, never listening to the same thing twice. I told her, Let's try something new. Take one short video, no more than 3 minutes, and listen to it every day for 1 week. She looked at me like I was joking. The same one? She asked. Won't that be boring? But I asked her to trust me and treat it like an experiment. She chose a short video clip from an interview. On day 1, she understood about 40%. On day 2, she started catching full phrases. By day 4, she could almost recite entire sentences. With the speaker. By day 6, she said she could listen with her eyes closed and still follow the conversation easily. Her confidence exploded. She said, "Now I feel like I own those expressions. They're not just words, they're mine." That's the transformation that happens when you stop chasing new content and start going deeper with what you already have. You don't need a library of videos or hours of audio. You need one good piece of content and a commitment to return to it again and again. Choose something that interests you, something that feels just a little bit challenging, but not overwhelming. Listen once without subtitles. Then listen again with subtitles. Then try shadowing a part of it. Listen while walking, while cooking, while on the bus. Let it become part of your daily rhythm. The repetition doesn't make it boring, it makes it powerful. When you hear the same clip multiple times, you also start noticing the details. Things you completely missed the first time. Maybe it's the way the speaker says "you know what I mean" at the end of a point. Or how they stretch the word really to add emphasis. These are small pieces of natural speech that don't show up in textbooks, but they make all the difference when you're trying to sound and understand like a fluent speaker. The more you listen, the more these patterns stick. They become part of your internal language system, and here's something else that happens with repetition: you stop translating. Because you've heard the phrases so many times, they stop needing mental effort. They feel automatic. Your brain no longer has to work through your first language. It hears the phrase and understands it directly. That's fluency. That's when you start reacting to English in English. And you get there not by rushing through hundreds of new clips, but by mastering just one at a time. Another benefit is that repeated listening builds your attention span in English. At first, it's hard to stay focused. Your mind wanders. But the more familiar the content becomes, the easier it is to stay engaged. You start enjoying the listening experience instead of feeling tired. This helps you build mental endurance, something every language learner needs. I remember another learner, Faisal from Dubai, who was preparing for a job interview in English. He was nervous about understanding the questions and responding smoothly. I gave him a 3-minute mock interview clip and asked him to listen to it every day for a week. He did more than that. He shadowed it, repeated parts out loud, and recorded himself. When the real interview came, he told me he felt like he had already practiced the whole thing. He recognized familiar phrases, knew how to respond, and most importantly, he wasn't afraid. That confidence came from deep, repeated listening, not from cramming a bunch of new materials. So here's what I want you to try. Find one short video. Something that feels slightly difficult, but interesting. Make it your anchor for the week. Day 1, listen with no subtitles. Day 2, listen again with subtitles. Day 3, repeat the sentences. Day 4, shadow. Day 5, close your eyes and just listen. Day 6, speak along. Day 7, try to retell what you heard in your own words. It takes just a few minutes a day, but the impact is big. Because every time you listen again, your brain is learning to listen better. Not just to that clip, but to everything in English. The goal is not to understand everything perfectly the first time. The goal is to train your brain through familiarity, repetition, and curiosity. When you do that, you'll start noticing real changes, not just in your listening skills, but in your confidence, your speaking, your memory, and your ability to connect with others in English. Repetition isn't boring. It's your secret weapon. And it only takes one clip to start making that difference. Elena is from Milan, and when she first joined an international marketing team, her biggest challenge wasn't writing emails or understanding reports, it was listening. Specifically, listening during live meetings. She told me that every time she had to join a video call in English, she felt anxious even before it started. Her heart would race, her mind would freeze, and once people began talking, she couldn't keep up. She said it felt like all the words blended into one long, fast stream. She tried taking notes, but by the time she wrote something down, the speaker had already moved on. After each meeting, she felt exhausted and frustrated, thinking, how do other people understand this so easily? At first, Elena thought the problem was her vocabulary. So she spent weeks memorizing new business terms. But that didn't help. The issue wasn't the words, it was the speed and the pressure. She told me, even when I know the vocabulary, I still can't process what people are saying fast enough. That's a common situation. Listening under pressure is very different from casual listening. In a meeting, you have no control over the speed, no chance to pause, and no time to think deeply about every sentence. It's stressful, and unless you've trained for it, it can make even advanced learners feel like beginners. I asked her if the meetings were recorded. She said yes. That was our breakthrough. I suggested she start using those recordings not just to review the content, but to actually train her listening. I showed her a process I call active rewatching. It's simple but incredibly effective. After each meeting, instead of just moving on, she would rewatch the conversation with a different goal, not to finish it quickly, but to understand it deeply. She chose one part of the meeting, usually just 5 minutes, and played it again, but this time with full control. Here's how she did it. First, she watched the segment once with no notes, just to listen. Then she played it again, pausing after every sentence to write down what she heard. She didn't use the transcript at first, she tried to catch as much as possible on her own. Then she checked the transcript, if available, or listened again to compare her notes. She looked at where she misunderstood, where she missed connections, or where a word sounded totally different than what she expected. She wasn't just practicing listening, she was analyzing it like a language detective. She also started noticing patterns. Phrases like "let's circle back," or "just to clarify," came up often. So did certain pronunciation features, how going to becomes gonna, or how did you sounds like did ya. These little discoveries helped her feel more confident, because now she wasn't guessing. She was understanding the logic behind what she was hearing. Each replay of the conversation made her feel less like an outsider and more like part of the team. After just a few weeks of this practice, something shifted. One day, during a weekly check-in, she noticed she could follow the conversation in real time without getting lost. She didn't need to pause and think after every sentence. She could respond naturally, without translating in her head. She even asked a follow-up question during the meeting, something she had never done before. She emailed me later that day and said, "Julia, I didn't just survive that meeting, I was part of it." That's the power of turning a stressful moment into a learning tool. Elena didn't need a new course or fancy software. She just needed to look at her real-life experience as a source of practice. By replaying her meetings with a clear method, she trained her brain to listen faster and respond more confidently. And the best part is, she wasn't studying abstract examples, she was using her actual work life. Everything she learned was relevant and immediately useful. You can do this too. If you attend online classes, join webinars, or participate in work calls that are recorded, start using those as your listening practice. Don't just listen once and forget. Go back. Choose a short section. Listen carefully. Write down what you hear. Check for mistakes. Watch again. Speak some of the lines out loud. Shadow them. Break them down. This is not passive learning. This is real training. And it works because it's connected to your life. You already care about the topic. You already need the language. That's why your brain pays attention in a different way. Another thing Elena did was to prepare for meetings differently. Before, she used to read documents or bullet points and hope for the best. But now, she started watching similar conversations on YouTube or listening to business podcasts in English before her calls. This helped her get used to the kind of language she was likely to hear. It warmed up her ears and gave her a mental framework. For example, if the meeting was going to be about project updates, she would spend 15 minutes before the call listening to a short podcast about team management or timelines. That small habit made a big difference. It put her in the right mindset and helped her stay calm and focused. Over time, her confidence spread beyond meetings. She started joining discussions, sharing ideas, and even leading parts of the conversation. Not because she memorized better phrases, but because she trained her listening in a way that matched her real-world needs. Her growth came from repetition, reflection, and the courage to learn from her own experience. So if you've ever felt like Elena, lost during fast conversations, frustrated after meetings, unsure how to improve, try this approach. Start with something you already do. Take a piece of it and turn it into practice. You don't need perfect understanding on the first try. You just need to show up, again and again, with curiosity and focus. Your brain will do the rest. And one day, like Elena, you'll realize you're not just listening anymore. You're participating, with confidence. There's a big difference between listening and active listening. Most people think they're practicing their English when they watch a video or listen to a podcast, but if you're just sitting there, letting the words wash over you without doing anything, your brain is barely engaged. That's passive listening. And while it can help a little, especially at the beginning, it quickly reaches its limit. Your mind starts to wander. You catch some words, miss others, and by the end, you don't remember much. If you want to make real progress, you need to change the way you listen. You need to listen with your whole mind. You need to react. When you react to what you hear, everything changes. You're not just absorbing English anymore, you're processing it, predicting it, playing with it, and making it yours. And you don't need a conversation partner to do this. You can do it alone. You can do it anywhere. All you need is a video or audio clip and a decision to stop being passive. Let me walk you through how I teach this to my students. It starts with a simple rule: don't just listen, pause, predict, repeat, and respond. This 4-step method turns a 3-minute clip into an active language workout. And once you try it, you'll realize how much more you can get from the same piece of content. Step 1. Pause. As soon as someone says a sentence, pause. Don't let the next sentence start. Give yourself a second to think about what was just said. Ask yourself, did I understand that? If not, replay. If yes, go to the next step. Pausing is powerful because it gives your brain time to catch up. English moves fast, but when you pause, you take control. You're not racing anymore, you're reflecting. Step 2. Predict. Before pressing play again, try to guess what the speaker will say next. Think about the topic. What makes sense in this situation? If someone says, "Let me show you how to cook this," what might come next? Maybe, first, you chop the onions, or you'll need a pan. Prediction is a skill we use in real conversations all the time. It helps us follow what people are saying even when we don't catch every word. The more you practice this, the better your listening gets, not because you hear every single word, but because your brain gets faster at filling in the gaps. Step 3. Repeat. After the sentence plays, stop again and say it out loud. Try to match the speaker's rhythm, tone, and pronunciation. You don't have to be perfect, but this step connects your ears and your mouth. It trains your speech muscles to move like English speakers do. Even if you're alone, repeating sentences out loud is one of the most effective ways to improve both listening and speaking at the same time. And because you just predicted the line, you're already halfway there. Step 4. Respond. Now take it one step further. Respond to what you heard. Pretend you're in a conversation. If the speaker said, "I love traveling in summer," you might say, "Me too, especially to the coast," or "Really? I prefer winter." You don't need the right answer, just respond naturally. This builds conversation habits. You stop being a passive listener and start becoming an active participant. And over time, your brain gets faster at building real responses. I had a student named Daniel from Munich who tried this method with an English travel vlog. At first, he said it felt silly to talk to his laptop. But after just a week, he noticed something interesting. He was no longer just watching the video, he was engaging with it. He found himself answering questions, reacting to stories, and even laughing out loud. He said, "It's like I'm part of the conversation, even though I'm alone." And that feeling translated into real conversations. When he met English-speaking tourists in his city, he didn't freeze like before. His brain was ready. He had practiced listening and responding, not just understanding. You can do this with any content you like. Interviews, cooking shows, vlogs, audiobooks. Choose a section, just a few minutes long, and go through the steps. Pause after each sentence. Predict what's coming. Repeat what you hear. Respond like you're in a real conversation. If you do this every day for just 10 minutes, your listening will improve faster than it ever did with passive practice. Another benefit of reacting while listening is emotional engagement. When you respond to what someone says, even in your head, your brain pays more attention. It remembers better. That's why language you use stays with you longer than language you only hear. When you listen actively, you're not just training your ears, you're training your memory, your reflexes, your voice. It also helps you become more natural in conversation. When you practice reacting, you're building your intuition for how English works in real life. You start noticing common phrases like "you know what I mean," or "that sounds amazing." You pick up sentence patterns like "I've been meaning to," or "what I like about it is." These aren't just grammar points, they're the tools of real conversation. And the more you hear them and use them, the more automatic they become. I once had a student named Arya from Jakarta who struggled with fluency. She knew a lot of English, but her sentences were slow and full of hesitation. She practiced this method with short dialogues every morning. At first, she just paused and repeated. Then she started predicting. Finally, she began responding with her own thoughts. After 2 weeks, her speech became more fluid. She stopped translating in her head. She started thinking in English, not because she learned new vocabulary, but because she started using the language instead of just listening to it. That's the real difference. Passive listening is input. Active listening is interaction. If you only listen without reacting, your brain stays in low gear. But when you react, even alone, you're simulating a real conversation. And that's what prepares you for the real thing. You won't feel so surprised or frozen when someone asks you a question. You've already trained for that moment. If you're shy or nervous about speaking to others, this is the perfect place to start. You can react without anyone listening. You can make mistakes. You can experiment with different responses. You're not under pressure. You're in control. And that's how confidence is built, one reaction at a time. So next time you sit down to watch or listen to something in English, remember, don't just sit back and let it play. Get involved. Pause. Predict. Repeat. Respond. Treat every sentence like an invitation to participate. Turn that quiet video into your personal language gym. Because when you stop being a passive listener, you stop being a passive learner. You become someone who thinks, speaks, and listens with intention. And that's where real fluency starts to grow. Point one of the biggest myths in language learning is that you need hours and hours every day to see real progress. I've had so many students come to me and say, "Julia, I just don't have time to practice my English." And I always tell them the same thing: you don't need more time. You need a better system. 10 focused minutes a day can change your listening skills in ways that hours of distracted study never could. The secret is not in the amount of time, it's in how you use it. If you build a short, consistent habit around listening, you'll see your brain begin to change. Your ears will become sharper, your reactions faster, and your confidence stronger. And the best part is, you can do this without changing your entire life. You can fit it into the pockets of your day, even if you're busy, even if your schedule is full. Let's talk about what this kind of listening habit actually looks like. It starts with routine. The brain loves repetition. It learns faster when it knows what to expect. That's why your 10-minute habit should happen at the same time every day, if possible. This could be first thing in the morning, right after you wake up and before the world gets loud. Or maybe it's while you're walking to the bus stop, or during your coffee break. Some of my students like to listen right before bed because it helps them focus without distractions. What matters most is that you make it a non-negotiable part of your day, just like brushing your teeth. It's not something you do if you have time. It's something you do because it's your habit. Now, what do you listen to during those 10 minutes? That depends on your level, your mood, and your interests. But there are a few key rules I always suggest. First, choose content that is just slightly above your comfort zone. If it's too easy, your brain won't grow. If it's too hard, you'll feel frustrated and give up. Look for something where you understand 70 to 80%. That sweet spot keeps you challenged but not overwhelmed. For beginners, this might be a slow podcast with clear speech. For intermediate learners, it could be a vlog or an interview. For advanced learners, it might be a TED Talk or an unscripted conversation. The second rule is, choose something interesting. Never listen to something just because you feel you should. If you don't care about the topic, your brain won't engage. You'll zone out, and the 10 minutes won't give you much. But if the topic excites you even a little, your brain pays attention. Maybe it's a story, a documentary, a podcast about travel, business, cooking, or self-improvement. The content doesn't have to be educational in the traditional sense. It just has to be engaging. The third rule is, repeat it across a few days. You don't need a new clip every time. In fact, repetition is where the magic happens. If you listen to the same 3-minute audio for 3 days in a row, you will notice massive improvement. On day 1, you might only catch the main ideas. By day 3, you'll recognize phrases, predict what's coming, and start mimicking the speaker's rhythm. That's the kind of deep listening your brain remembers. So, how do you structure your 10 minutes? I teach a simple method that divides the time into 3 parts. The first 3 minutes, just listen. No subtitles, no distractions. Focus on the sound, try to catch the key points. Let your ears adjust. The next 3 minutes, listen again, this time with subtitles or a transcript. Now you're checking your understanding, seeing what you missed, connecting sound to meaning. The final 4 minutes, repeat some of the sentences out loud. Choose a few lines, pause the audio, and say them yourself. Match the speaker's tone, rhythm, and speed. You're not just listening anymore, you're training your mouth and your memory. Let me give you a real example. One of my students, Amir from Cairo, works long shifts and has very little free time. He thought he couldn't improve his English because he couldn't commit to long study sessions. I helped him design a 10-minute listening routine that he could do during his commute. He downloaded short podcast episodes about topics he liked, sports, news, and personal development. On the first day, he would listen once while on the train. On the second day, he'd listen again and check the transcript during his break. On the third day, he'd try to say some of the key phrases out loud. That's it, just 10 minutes a day. After 1 month, he told me he could understand more in real conversations, especially when people spoke quickly. He didn't change his schedule. He changed his system. Another student, Lena from Stockholm, built her 10-minute habit into her morning coffee time. She chose a series of short YouTube interviews with English subtitles. She would play one video while she got ready for her day. The first day was just for listening. The second day she'd write down new expressions. The third day she'd try to repeat parts of the interview in her own voice. She said it became her favorite part of the day, not just because of the learning, but because it gave her a small sense of achievement every morning. That feeling matters. When you start your day with a small success, it carries into everything else. Your 10-minute habit doesn't need to be complicated. You don't need a study plan, a tutor, or expensive apps. You need curiosity, consistency, and content that speaks to you. You can even rotate formats, audio 1 week, video the next. As long as you stay consistent, your brain will adapt. It will get faster at recognizing patterns, processing new sounds, and building confidence in real-life situations. One last tip: track your habit. Not in a stressful way, just a simple mark on your calendar or a quick note in your phone. Listened to podcast or watched interview. Seeing your progress builds motivation. You'll start to notice that even on days when you're tired or distracted, you still showed up. That builds discipline. That builds results. So if you've been telling yourself you're too busy to work on your English, I want to challenge that. You have 10 minutes. Everyone does. It might be while brushing your teeth, during your lunch break, or right before bed. But you can claim that time and make it yours. And if you use it wisely, if you focus, repeat, and react, you'll be amazed at how much your listening improves. Your ears will get sharper. Your understanding will grow. And little by little, you'll become the kind of listener who doesn't just hear English, you gets it. Marco lives in Seoul, and when he first started learning English more seriously, he felt overwhelmed by vocabulary. Like many learners, he believed that the fastest way to improve was to memorize more and more words. So he filled notebooks with long vocabulary lists. Every day he tried to learn 20 new terms. But after a few weeks, he noticed something strange: he couldn't remember most of them in real situations. When watching YouTube videos or listening to podcasts, the words he had studied didn't show up, and the words he did hear often weren't on his list. It felt like there was a gap between what he was studying and the real English he actually needed to understand. Then something simple but powerful happened. One day, Marco was watching an English vlog and he heard the speaker say, "It turns out." He had no idea what it meant, but the way the person said it caught his attention. Later that same week, while listening to a podcast on his way to work, he heard it again. "It turns out." She wasn't even at the event. A third time, during a movie scene, a character said, "It turns out." He already knew the truth. Marco paused the film and thought, wait. I keep hearing this phrase. What does it really mean? That one expression started to stand out. Instead of rushing to the next 20 words, Marco decided to slow down. He chose to focus on just that one phrase, "it turns out." He looked it up, listened to more examples, and practiced saying it himself. He wrote a few example sentences like, "It turns out I was wrong," and "It turns out the flight was delayed." He even made a game out of it, challenging himself to notice the phrase during the day. What happened next was surprising. The more he focused on that one expression, the more it started to stick. Not just the meaning, but the sound, the rhythm, the intonation. He could hear it clearly now, even when people spoke fast. That's when he realized something important. Studying 20 new words a day doesn't help if you don't hear them in the real world. But studying one phrase deeply, hearing it in real conversations, repeating it out loud, using it in your own sentences, changes your relationship with English. It trains your ear. It trains your memory. And it makes English feel more natural. I love this story because it shows something I believe deeply. The best way to build your listening skills isn't through quantity. It's through quality. Focusing on one useful, high-frequency expression every day is like giving your brain a building block. These blocks are strong because they're connected to real usage. They don't exist only in textbooks or word lists. They exist in life, in interviews, movies, social media, and conversations. When you hear a phrase like "it turns out," or "as far as I know," or "to be honest," those are phrases people actually use. And if you study just one of them deeply, listen to it, repeat it, spot it in the wild, you're doing something much more powerful than memorizing 20 words that you'll forget next week. You're building a true listening skill. You're giving your brain a chance to learn how English sounds and when certain phrases appeared. I often give my students what I call the one phrase challenge. It's simple. Every day, pick one phrase you heard naturally, maybe in a video, a song, or a podcast. Write it down. Look up a few examples. Then go back to the original clip and listen to that phrase again. Try saying it yourself. Try using it in your next conversation or writing practice. And throughout your day, pay attention. You might hear it again in a different context. That's when your brain starts to form connections. That's when real learning begins. When Marco shared this with me, he said something that stuck with me. He said, "Before, English felt like a huge wall of noise. But now, I hear pieces. I recognize small parts. It's like I've started carving out paths in the noise." That's the result of this kind of focused listening. Instead of trying to do too much, you focus on one thing until it becomes part of you. Then you move to the next. Slowly, your listening becomes sharper, faster, more intuitive. And here's another thing, the phrases you focus on will start to give you clues about English rhythm and stress. For example, "it turns out" is often said quickly and smoothly, with the stress on turns. When you hear it over and over, you begin to recognize not just the words, but how they sound when spoken naturally. That helps you stop depending on subtitles. It also helps you speak more fluently because you're copying real rhythm, not just reading from a list. Another one of my students, Jonas from Oslo, tried this approach too. He chose "at the end of the day" as his phrase of the week. He heard it in a business podcast and started paying attention. He heard it again during a meeting and later that evening in a movie. He wrote it in a notebook, practiced using it in context, and by the end of the week, he wasn't just recognizing it, he was using it naturally. That one phrase became part of his speaking and listening toolkit. Not because he drilled it 100 times, but because he noticed it, connected with it, and practiced it in real life. That's the beauty of the one-phrase method. It's easy to start. It doesn't take much time. And it creates a ripple effect. The more you do it, the more confident you become. Suddenly, native speech doesn't feel like a storm of unfamiliar sounds. It feels like something you're slowly decoding, piece by piece, phrase by phrase. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by everything you don't know in English, I want you to stop and flip that thinking. Instead of trying to learn a list of 20 new words today, try this: listen carefully to something you enjoy. Notice one phrase. Just one. Write it down. Use it. Listen for it again tomorrow. Let your ears and memory focus deeply. And you'll discover, just like Marco did, that real progress doesn't come from rushing. It comes from noticing. From listening with intention. From learning one powerful piece at a time. One of the most important things I've learned, both as a teacher and as a learner of languages, is this: real communication doesn't only happen with native speakers. English today is a global language. It's used in meetings, airports, universities, and conversations all over the world, and the people speaking it come from every background imaginable. If you only train your ears to understand one type of English, one accent, one speed, one cultural tone, you're preparing for a world that doesn't really exist anymore. That's why I always encourage my students to listen to different voices. Not just American or British, but Indian, Nigerian, German, South African, Filipino, and many more. Because that's what English sounds like today. That's the reality. And the more you expose yourself to these different ways of speaking, the stronger and more flexible your listening becomes. I had a student once named Marta, originally from Prague. She was preparing for an international job interview in English. She practiced for weeks with recordings of American speakers. She felt confident. But when the day of the interview came, she was completely thrown off. Her interviewer was from Lagos, Nigeria, and spoke with a strong accent she had never heard before. Marta understood maybe half of what was said. She felt panicked, embarrassed, unprepared. Not because her English was weak, it wasn't, but because her ears were trained to only recognize a very narrow range of voices. She hadn't built the ability to adapt. After that experience, she told me something I'll never forget: it's not enough to know English. You have to know Englishes. And that's so true. The English used by someone from Johannesburg may sound different than the English used by someone from Toronto or Seoul or Mumbai. But they're all valid, all correct, and all part of the real world you're going to interact with. That's why your listening practice should reflect that diversity. If your goal is to understand English in real life, not just in textbooks or language exams, you have to step outside the bubble of standard accents. That means watching videos by content creators from different countries, listening to interviews, podcasts, and panels where people speak English as a second language. It means getting used to different speeds, different rhythms, and different ways of pronouncing the same word. And it means letting go of the idea that only native speaker English is the right English. One thing I like to do with my students is introduce them to short clips featuring English speakers from various countries. For example, we might watch a TEDx talk by an engineer from India, or listen to a travel vlog by someone from Poland, or a business presentation from someone in Ghana. At first, some students struggle. They say, "I can't follow this. It's too different." But after a few sessions, something shifts. Their ears begin to adjust. They stop focusing on the accent and start listening for meaning. They begin to recognize the global patterns of communication, the way ideas are expressed, how pauses are used, what common vocabulary appears again and again. They realize that understanding different accents isn't about catching every word. It's about training your brain to listen flexibly. Another student I worked with, David from Paris, had an interesting experience. He started listening to English news channels from various countries. He watched Al Jazeera English, where many reporters are from the Middle East and Africa. Then he tried NHK World from Japan and DW News from Germany. Each had reporters speaking English in slightly different ways. At first, it was hard. But he stayed consistent, just 10 minutes a day. After a month, he told me, "Julia, now I can walk into any English conversation and feel ready. Because I've stopped expecting perfect pronunciation. I've started listening for ideas." And that's a mindset shift that can completely transform your listening. When you stop chasing perfect pronunciation and start paying attention to intention, rhythm, and message, your brain works smarter. You become more confident, not just in understanding English, but in using it with anyone, anywhere. One thing I recommend is creating a weekly challenge for yourself. Each week, choose a different region of the world and find an English speaker from that region. For example, this week, you might watch an interview with a South African entrepreneur. Next week, a documentary narrated by an Indian scientist. The week after that, a discussion between Korean students at an English-speaking university. You can find this content easily online: YouTube, TEDx, University Talks, even Instagram Lives. Listen, pause, replay, and write down what you understand. Don't worry about missing words. Focus on getting the big picture. Ask yourself, what is this person trying to communicate? How are they using English to share their message? This practice doesn't just help you with comprehension, it makes you more open-minded, more comfortable in international settings, more aware of how English adapts to its speaker. It also helps reduce anxiety. Many learners freeze when they hear an unfamiliar accent. But once you've trained your ears on variety, you won't panic. You'll recognize patterns, decode messages, and feel in control even when the speaker doesn't sound like a textbook narrator. I also believe this kind of listening makes you a better speaker. Why? Because it shows you that there is no one correct English. You learn that communication is about connection, not perfection. You stop being afraid of your own accent, your own voice. You begin to understand that clarity, not similarity, is what matters. That's incredibly freeing. One of my favorite moments in the classroom is when students begin repeating phrases or expressions they picked up from speakers around the world. Suddenly, someone who once doubted their ability is saying, "Actually, I heard someone from Nairobi say it like this," or "This is how they described it in that conference from Singapore." That's when I know they've stepped into real global English. That's when they've moved beyond the classroom and into the world. So, if you've only been listening to one type of English voice, one country, one accent, I want to invite you to explore. Open your ears to the full range of global English. Let yourself feel a little uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is where the learning happens. And with each new voice you hear, your ears will become stronger, your mind more open, and your confidence more real. Because fluency isn't just about words. It's about connection across borders, accents, and voices. And the more you listen, the more ready you become. If you've been listening to this episode and wondering, where do I begin? I want to make it really simple for you. Let's take all the ideas we've talked about and put them into one small, powerful challenge. that you can start today. You don't need special tools. You don't need perfect English. All you need is one video or podcast episode that you enjoy and a decision to listen to it not once, but 5 times this week. Yes, the same audio. 5 times. And if you follow through, you'll start to notice something amazing. The sound of English will begin to change in your brain. Words will feel more familiar. Sentences will flow more naturally. And the fear of not understanding will start to disappear. Here's how I want you to do it. First, pick your content. Choose something short, maybe 3 to 5 minutes long. It could be a YouTube video from someone you like, a short interview, or a podcast episode from a series you enjoy. Don't pick something too difficult. Choose a clip where you understand at least 60 or 70%. That way, you're challenged but not overwhelmed. If you're not sure where to look, go back to something you've listened to before. Repetition is not a weakness, it's a tool. Once you have your clip, commit to listening to it 5 times. Not all in one day, but over the course of the week. Day 1, just listen. No subtitles, no pressure. Don't worry about catching every word. Let your brain get used to the sound, the rhythm, the speaker's voice. Maybe you'll only understand the general idea, and that's perfectly fine. Day 2, listen again, but this time, use subtitles or a transcript if you have one. Now you're not just hearing the words, you're seeing them too. You're connecting sound to meaning. Pause when you need to. Replay any part that feels unclear. Write down 1 or 2 phrases that you like or that you didn't recognize the first time. On day 3, remove the subtitles again. Listen with fresh ears. Can you follow more this time? You might be surprised by how much more you understand now that your brain has had a chance to process it. If you miss something, that's okay. Just keep going. This round is about building comfort with the content. On day 4, do something different. Listen and speak. Choose a few sentences from the audio and repeat them out loud. Try to match the speaker's rhythm and intonation. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to try. This helps build a stronger connection between your listening and speaking muscles. You're not only hearing English, you're producing it. On day 5, listen one more time. This is your chance to feel your progress. Pay attention to how different it sounds now compared to the first day. Maybe on day 1 you felt lost. But now, sentences make sense. Phrases feel familiar. Your ears aren't just hearing English, they're understanding it. That's what I want for you, and if you want to go a little further, take a few minutes after each listen to reflect. You can keep a small journal or use the Notes app on your phone. Just write down a few lines. Today I understood more about. Or this phrase was new to me, or even I felt more confident than yesterday. These reflections help your brain notice your growth. And when you look back a week later, you'll see how far you've come. One of my students, Clara, from Vienna, used this exact method. She listened to the same 5-minute TEDx talk about creativity every day for 1 week. At first, she said it felt boring. She thought, why would I listen to something I already heard? But by day 3, she realized she was picking up words she had missed before. By day 5, she was repeating whole sentences and using them in real conversations. What changed wasn't the audio, it was her. Her brain had tuned in, made connections, and gained confidence. And it all started with 5 focused listens. This challenge works because it trains your brain the way it actually learns. Not by being perfect, but by showing up again and again. It works because it builds familiarity. And familiarity builds fluency. When you hear the same sentence 5 times in 5 days, your brain doesn't just memorize it, it understands it. It recognizes the sound pattern, the stress, the pauses, the meaning. And soon, it becomes part of your language system. You don't need fancy grammar rules or complicated exercises to do this. You need repetition. You need patience. And most of all, you need consistency. Your listening will improve not because you did something difficult, but because you did something simple over and over. That's how real skills are built, and remember this, your brain was designed to do this. Learning a language isn't about having a special talent. It's about using the brain you already have in the way it was meant to learn, through repetition, exposure, and small steps taken daily. Your brain is flexible. It adapts. It grows with practice. You're not bad at listening, you're just not finished training yet. If you take on this challenge, I'd love to hear how it goes for you. You can tell me what video or podcast you chose, what you noticed after day 3, what surprised you on day 5. Share it in the comments or in our community. Because when you talk about your learning, you reinforce it. You remind yourself that fluency is a journey, and that you're already on it. So choose your audio. Commit to 5 days. Listen, repeat, reflect. And trust the process. You don't need to do everything perfectly. You just need to do something regularly. That's where the transformation begins. Every time you listen with intention, you are building fluency. You're training your brain to catch the rhythm, to recognize the structure, to make sense of the message. 1 clip. 5 listens. That's your challenge. You can start today. And I'll be right here, cheering you on every step of the way.